This is the part where I'm hoping I have all the technology figured out. There's actually 2 cameras on me because he has an international audience, and so there's an international camera. And then then what happens is, in a minute here, he'll turn on the cameras, and then we'll be live. And we're probably live on audio right now as I'm waiting. And I keep thinking I have all the technology figured out, and then I'm kind of just, making sure. So then the radio is streaming internationally. Like I said, the station itself is over 100,000, which is really fun. And really fun for me. This is leaving academic deanhood and all those years of that kind of speaking and that kind of restrictive environment, and coming and doing this. And so,
nice.
Yeah. So I'm still just waiting for the camera to turn on, because it's blue. It's supposed to go red at some point. I'm sure it will. So are you writing another book just while we're chatting, waiting for this to go live? Are you writing another one?
I don't have anything in the works. I have ideas, but nothing is being developed right now. No, I'm not even sure about the future of books, to be honest with you. Everybody who says that they've read one of my books really means they've listened to it.
Really? I read them. See, I have them. I have them in hardback right here. Well, this one's in hardback.
Nice.
And I've bought them for other people. Okay, and now we're on. Cool. Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Lisa Show here on KUHS Denver, the stream. Thank you for tuning in. I have an amazing guest today. I'm so psyched. But before I do that, let me just do a little bit of introduction to the station and the show, in case you don't know where you are. My background, as I've probably told you, is I've got a PhD in psych. I'm a trained astrologer. I have 2 master's degrees, one in geology and one in Jewish spirituality. I actually have more academic degrees than anybody needs, but this show is not about that. This show is for you. This show, all of my shows, are about helping you find some inspiration inside yourself. I want to inspire a renaissance of spirit, new beginning within you, especially now. And right now, one of the things all my shows are about is moving the needle from fear to hope, and from fear to joy, if we can get there, right? I'd like us to be prisoners of hope, actually, that wherever we look, we see that there is possibility and potential within us and around us. Let me do a shout out while I'm at it to one of my marvelous, marvelous sponsors, veteranspride.org. It's a nonprofit, and if you've been listening, you know I want all of us to be philanthropists by the end of the year, which could mean $5 a month that you donate. And for you, that is philanthropy. And if you're looking for a place to donate, try veteranspride.org. It is a nonprofit that helps veterans remember their own pride and share that in their service. You can find them, you can click the donate button, and you can be a philanthropist and help a vet. And one more thing about me before I get on to my great guest, and that is thank you for all of you who've purchased my book, The Way of the Well. It is that adventurous spiritual romance, and it, I think, is very helpful for a lot of people right now. That's what I've heard. It's on Amazon, and it's on Barnes & Noble. You can get it wherever you buy books. Okay, so enough about me. I have an amazing guest with me today, Matthew May. And before I let him introduce himself, I want to tell you how I discovered him. Found him, I'm not sure the right word when somebody's already out there doing such great stuff. Back in the 90s, when I started my journey as an academic dean, I was able to go to a 2-week workshop at, presented at Harvard. And one of the presenters was a woman who said if we could find elegance in our work, if we could find elegance in our budgets, in our curriculum, think about what our institutions would look like. And this entire room of deans and presidents and whatever went, yes, how do we do that? And she said, I have no idea. And she spent some time, she's written some books since then, and I went off on this journey talking to artists and business people. What is elegance? How do we find it? And then I discovered this book, In Pursuit of Elegance. You can get it anywhere you buy books. And it answered my question. It was the first book I read, the first anything I read, that linked art and business and personal development together. And once I started following Matthew May, I ended up reading this book, Winning the Brain Game, which is his most recent book. And I think right now, in the middle of COVID confusion, this is an amazing read. I've used it in graduate classes when I've taught graduate leadership classes, problem solving, so we could think about where do we get caught. So, having said that, Matt, thank you for joining me today. Welcome to the show. I would love it if you would fill in the pieces, you know, before the in Pursuit of Elegance and then all the way to the Brain Game. Can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Matt May in a nutshell, inside 3 minutes or something like that. I can do that. The whole notion of elegance, which it seems will be our theme today, is actually one that made my life fairly miserable for a few years while I was working as sort of a captive consultant, I guess you might call me, at a company called Toyota. Lucky for me, I guess, it's lucky, because it changed my life. I was there for about 8 years, and they bought all of my time as a consultant, as an advisor, and I was attached to the University of Toyota. Those 8 years changed the way I looked at the world. But what made my life sort of challenging at that time, during that time, was this internal mantra that Toyota had, and it's something like this: people don't want our products and services, they want solutions. And when it comes to solutions, simple is better, elegant is better still. And the difficulty for me was that they never bothered, and I couldn't find a succinct definition of elegant or elegance. Just the difficulty that you had. If you look it up in the dictionary, you'll get some kind of circular definition, around simplicity. An example being an elegant solution, which didn't help me. So, but that was the mantra, and fast forward to now. I left there in 2006. I was there for 8 years. It launched me on a journey around the notion of elegance and elegant solutions. And beyond my experience at Toyota, my first book was called The Elegant Solution, Toyota's form of chain. But that just sort of trying to go beyond one organization, against in business and their products, and went around the world trying to find examples of elegance. Came up with my own definition of it, which we'll tease out as we go forward. Okay. But I will tell you that I had a Grand Master plan. I didn't. It was an accident that I started working with Toyota in the first place. It was an accident that my first book happened. But that once you have one book, they kind of want more. And I started speaking, and 5 books later, I'm on your show. So my day job is that of essentially a team facilitator, working with teams, mostly in tech-forward companies, helping them track down elegant solutions to complicated problems. I'm a master of really nothing other than the art of getting people to unveil and release their best thinking, focused on the problem at hand. That's really my hard skill, if I have one.
I watched and have watched your TED Talks and then some of your other interviews, and it is fascinating some of the ways that you're able to link some of your pieces of elegance, specifically subtraction seems to be a big one, to bring teams together. And that is an amazing skill to help people change their thinking. I have to tell you, as an academic dean and still a professor in some places, getting students to think outside what they already know is incredibly challenging. So that's a great talent you have. So you wrote about elegance, right? Is there a way, I've always wanted to know this, how did you come up with those 4 pieces? And can you just talk about those 4 pieces of elegance for a minute?
Yeah, sure. I started, as I cast about, so in the book that you referred to, which is the second book, In Pursuit of Elegance, there's sort of 4 components. There was symmetry, and there was seduction, and subtraction, and sustainability as the elements of elegance. And I guess for those listening, it would help to have a working definition of elegance. And so it's quite simply this, for an elegance solution. But elegance to me is achieving the maximum effect with the minimum means. Okay. And the emphasis being on the minimum means part. So those 4 elements, I actually, they aren't mine. I'd love to say that I came up with them out of my own, thinking, but I went to school on a gentleman at Stanford by the name of Donald Knuth, who's sort of the father of computer programming. Really? And he had sort of an informal definition of elegance, because he was all about elegant solutions and elegance in computer programming, of all things, of coding. And I found that fascinating because of its ties to mathematics and physics, and most scientists and physicists and mathematicians are all after the same thing, this notion of elegance, where it's this combination of unusual simplicity with surprising power. And it's Einstein's E equals mc squared, which explains the world, right? Yeah. It's that kind of pursuit. And so I took some words right out of his mouth and began to explore each of them, finding examples in the real world, from society to art to architecture to social engineering, if you will, to urban design. And try to connect the dots, more for my own benefit than anything else, so I could help understand what I was after. But does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Lovely. Can you repeat that sort of notion that there's a amazing simplicity that leads to powerful results? I'm probably not saying it exactly like you did, but I love that. When I would say elegance to people, inevitably they would think I was talking about pearls and white napkins, and I couldn't get them to see that elegant solutions. And when I would talk about elegant design, they thought I was talking about design thinking. Like, no, elegance. So thank you for that, and that's why obviously your book for me linked those things together that I was searching for. So then,
I wish it was a stickier word. it's not the stickiest of concepts. I mean, we think about, oh gosh, who's the actress that springs to mind when you talk about elegance? What was her name? Audrey Hepburn.
There we go. Yes.
Audrey Hepburn. Then you think about Cary Grant. When you say, elegant, that people spring to mind.
That's right.
So anyway.
So I have to say that one of the favorite pieces of that puzzle that I use when I work with people is seduction, and I'm trying to reclaim that word so that people don't immediately think of sex, but they think of being seduced in. There's nothing wrong with sex, but that's not what I'm trying to get to. But you really moved to focus on subtraction, sort of as your next step. Is that right?
Yes, and from the very first piece of writing, The Elegant Solution, each successive book, if you will, body of thought, is derivative and digging deeper into the previous. So following the elegance solution, I went, as you've read In Pursuit of Elegance, I wanted to dig deeper into elegance beyond the one-line description and experience all over the world. Then the thing that seemed to be the stickiest when I spoke to people was this notion of subtraction, how kind of less is best. Mm-hmm. And so then the laws of subtraction came out. And as part of subtraction, tied to that is the notion of sustainability, which I didn't mean to connote kind of environmental sustainability, but the notion of how do you sustain this notion of elegance, and that lands us in thinking. And then I want to go into more of the things that get in the way of elegant solutions, and of course it's always ourselves that we get in our own way. So each of these is a deeper dive of what came before. So always trying to dig down deeper, and that comes from the time I spent at Toyota too, when they taught me how to dig down to find the root cause of a problem by constantly doing what kids do, asking why.
Right. And I know that I've watched you in some of your presentations work with groups, and that subtraction is so powerful because it is about letting go. And I want to spend just a little time on that with COVID before we move into the brain game, because what I'm finding with my clients right now is many of them fought the subtraction of a pandemic and a lockdown and isolation, and now what they're saying is, I don't want to go back. I have subtracted running around needlessly. I have subtracted taking my kids to 15 events in a week. I have subtracted rush hour traffic. And my life is richer. So I'm wondering if you have seen that, if you are talking to people about subtraction in that way, or just comments you might have on that.
Well, I think once your radar is attuned to the idea that you can achieve or optimize your own experience and maximize your own experience through doing less, so or at least not adding more. So once your radar is attuned to that, you begin to adopt that as almost a habit, and you look for ways to get the most out of something with the least amount of input, which is kind of interesting because our brains are kind of hardwired to be lazy in the first place. But juxtaposed with that is our DNA that comes from eons of evolution, where we are hardwired to also add, to hoard, to store. Comes from days of survival on the savannah, right? So all of those kind of forces are at play, and the guiding or umbrella law of subtraction goes something like this: what isn't there can often trump what is. And pardon the use of the word Trump, if that offends anyone. But it's the notion of what isn't there can be more powerful than what is. And whether that is by accident, that, oh my gosh, I don't have the ability to go here or there, or and then you start finding out that there's other experiences, you go, well gosh, that missing element, actually, that missing piece is actually what is kind of making this day go well. But when you talk about COVID and coronavirus, and gosh, it's nothing that any of us wished for. But to me, there are a number of applications of that uber rule. What isn't there? I mean, let's just think about I don't know if you want to go down this path, and you can stop me if you want. But just in the science of it,
yes.
What makes this particular virus so difficult is what isn't there. What isn't there is symptoms. So
that's right.
Our spread is so much more difficult because people are asymptomatic or non-symptomatic
or pre-symptomatic, and then the symptoms, we can't say everybody is going to have a certain symptom. Right?
Yeah.
So that's a great point. It's what's not there is is what's fascinating about it.
It's baffling, our best scientists, because in every other case of a virus, you don't get it until you are showing signs of having it. But if there are no signs of it, oh my gosh, what do you do? So, I mean, there are other kind of laws of subtraction. Another one being the simplest rules often yield the most effective experience. So, and we've kind of screwed up on that,
We've
right?
screwed up on that.
We've made it so complicated to understand what we should be doing. Look at CDC guidelines, and they're pages long for schools and for localities, and but if you boil it down to the things that are really making a difference now, we believe, right? It's just a couple of things. It's like stay 6 feet apart.
That's right.
It's wear a mask. Wash your hands. Boom.
There you go. Boom.
Yeah. But now that butts up against, and what we're seeing, the ramifications of this are, it butts up against our, at least in our country in America, there's a dark side to our American individualism, and it lands us on the notion of kind of self-indulgence and selfishness.
Right.
Excuse me. And so those two things clash, right? So it's not just enough to have these simple rules that seem hard to follow or easy to follow, but they're not that easy to follow because we have this. I mean, gosh, you get on an airplane, and what do? They tell you, when they're doing their little spiel about the oxygen mask, you always take care of yourself first, right? Before you take care of someone else. And that's kind of ingrained in who we are. So all those factors combined, we need an elegant solution.
I know we need an elegant solution. Clearly, you are needed right now. Because it's interesting, that's a great point, that right now, yes, take care of yourself, but be kind. Let's add kindness to that. After you put yours on in the airplane, put somebody else's on, right? Let's do some kindness. I think that what you started to touch on were some of the points in the brain game. And it is because I believe we evolved from a prey creature. And so even before we get to hunting and gathering on the savannas, right, we are fearful. We're always looking for what might be out to get us, because that's just how our brain, that's how we evolved. And then we evolved walking miles and miles a day across the savannah, and we spend our time sitting. And our brain, I think, then struggles with how do I respond to this. That was great. Thank you. Let's move into the Winning the Brain Game. And if anyone's looking, this is the book. Really, it's a great read. It's a really good read. Buy it. It's very good. So let's talk about you, because that's an interesting story. You started with Toyota, elegance, searching for it yourself. What is the definition of elegance? Thank you for finding it. And then moved into sort of diving deeper, and then, of course, the ways the brain gets in our way. So I would just love to go through the sort of pieces of the brain game, and if they relate to COVID, great, but really how you can see us maybe working to look at our own brain flaws to help us have a better experience of what we're going through, right? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So your first whole category is misleading, and you talk about leaping. Do you want to just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, let me take a short step back to sort of describe where the subtitle of that book is Fixing the 7 Fatal Flaws of Thinking. In my role as a facilitator, I work with teams all the time, and I had been assigned, while I was at Toyota, I had been assigned an external team, a non-Toyota team, from the Los Angeles Police Department. We actually, at the University of Toyota, we worked with companies that would come to Toyota to kind of learn about lean thinking. And one of the teams that I was assigned to was the bomb squad of Los Angeles Police Department. And it was a unique team, and no one wanted this team. Everyone was kind of fearful of it because we had been told these are the the young guns. These are the type A's, the highest paid on the force, and they're going to eat us alive because we're civilians, and they're the guys cutting the wire. And this was back in 2005, so we're talking about 15 years ago. And I got handed this assignment, and I knew that I'm going to spend 2 days with people that didn't really want to be there, to try and develop a new standard for how to respond to bomb threats in this new age. We're probably 4 years into post 9/11, and IEDs, or improvised explosive devices, were a thing, and the standards had not evolved. And so I knew that I was going to be faced with 12 people. It was a 12-person team over 2 days that were going to be looking at me like I had 3 heads, and how dare someone who has never walked in their boots try and help them come up with a new way to do their work, because I've never done it. So I knew that I had to, pardon the expression, diffuse the situation, and so I came up with a thought starter, a brain teaser that I thought might diffuse the situation. It was kind of an interesting one. It's called the prisoner's release, which I thought was kind of appropriate because these are cops. You actually, you work in pairs, which they do because they're partners. They always work as a 2-person team, and it revolves around handcuffs, rope handcuffs. And I'm not going into the details. When I watched them do this exercise, and none of them were able to solve the problem in an LA, or at all, much less an elegant way, I started to observe, just in a short period, that they were doing certain things, and everyone was doing the same thing. And one of the things that everyone did when I said go was they immediately leapt to action. Just kind of trying things. In a physical version of brainstorming, it was body storming. They're hooked together in these rope handcuffs, and it looks like a mix of Twister and crazy dance moves. And the interesting thing is they all were doing it. So not only did they lead to solutions right away, they all leapt to sort of the same solution, which I thought was fairly interesting. I had never done this exercise before with teams.
Oh, that was the first time? Okay.
Pardon me?
That was the first time. And let me just add that if you're listening, so just a quick break. This is KUHS Denver, The Stream, and this is Matthew May, my guest on the Dr. Lisa Show. And if you look at his TED Talk, you can see a video of this, and he's got people hooked together with strings, and they all look like they're doing the same twister dance, and you can tell if you're watching immediately that it won't work. Right? As soon as you look at it from the outside, you know there is no way anything anyone is doing is going to work. So Matthew May, YouTube, you can find it. So go ahead, finish the story.
So number one, they leapt to a solution. Number two, they leapt to the same solution. Number three, they kept doing the same thing over and over in different iterations, even though it didn't work. And finally, they started looking at the instructions that I had put on I had flashed up on the, PowerPoint, trying to game the system. They would look over what other people were doing, and seeing that it wasn't working, but they went back to doing the same thing. And it was just an interesting experiment, and I loved it so much for 2 reasons. One, all of a sudden, they weren't the smartest people in the room when I showed them the solution. And number two, I thought, well, gosh, I'm going to keep using this with other teams as a way to introduce 2 days of thinking through a complex problem to arrive at an elegant solution. And over the course of probably 10 years and hundreds of thousands of people, these patterns became very clear to me. And the most prevalent pattern is that whenever we are handed an unfamiliar problem that we've never seen before, we immediately jump to a solution. And that solution is one that is, unfortunately, obvious but doesn't work. And it's universal. No matter how many times I do this, and I have other thought starters that I use that are in that book as well, but no matter how many times I do this, it never fails. No one
It's amazing.
I should say. No one stops and thinks. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It looks simple.
It does.
It looks like a simple problem. Therefore, I ought to be able to solve this. It's certainly not as complex as anything I do in my daily work. So let me just try something. And so that's what leaping is. So leaping to conclusions, jumping to conclusions. Malcolm Gladwell, when he wrote Blink, had a great story that was the genesis of Blink, and that's really about sort of, he called it thin slicing. I sort of take the opposite view that you got to not blink, but think.
Yes. Yeah. And I definitely see that. I mean, I see it in the classroom all the time when I'm working with teaching graduate students. I definitely saw it as an academic dean around the budget table, around anything, that we just all sort of let's go to solution. And it's just maybe that's, again, that human DNA that we have that says I might be in danger, I need to solve this now, and I must have what I need to solve it. So, yeah.
It's part of that. It's also part the way we educate ourselves.
I agree.
Until you enter the school system, learning looks much different.
Yes.
Preschool, learning happens after the test, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So you watch a child play.
Right.
You watch a child in the high chair, and you can watch her try to solve a problem. That problem goes something like this, right? There's a bowl of food in front of me, and I need to figure out a way to get it on the ground.
That's right.
Right? And you watch her eye movements, and you'll see her she'll look at the spoon, she'll look at the bowl, she'll look at her hand. So she's got 3 hypotheses, right?
Right.
And she's a great little scientist. So she picks the one that looks like it might be most impactful, which is tipping the bowl off the tray, right? And sure enough, it works. Right? There's food everywhere. Great feedback, right? There's food everywhere. It's noisy. Mom gets really busy. And mom puts the bowl back on, and like a good little scientist, she repeats, she tries to confirm her results. And
That's great.
The second time, though, Dad, I'm a little not liking that, so it's a different result. And so she goes to another hypothesis or solution. That's what learning looks like.
Right.
When we get in the school system, we reverse that. So it's not us asking the question anymore, it's the teacher giving us the question to answer, and in a timed way, we need to come up with a solution. And it's the right solution. There's a right and a wrong to it, right? So the learning comes before the test. The test, when we're before school, the test comes first and we learn from it. We flip that when we get in the school system. So of course, when we get into work, our jobs, of course we're going to do what we learned in school, which is try to get the right answer for the boss, for the organization, for whatever. So leaping to solutions is, it's not necessarily how we jumped into the world, we've learned it, so we got to unlearn it.
That's right. That's a great, let me just go down that rabbit hole just a tad bit more, because it's sort of a mantra I've been repeating for many years. I was an academic dean in the adult learning world, and so adults returning to school, 5- and 8-week classes, online learning, hybrid learning, and problem-based learning, right? Because so again, here's a problem, and let's work the problem. And there might not be just one solution, there are solutions. How do you do this? And so that was named sort of adult learning. But the truth is, if you go to a Montessori classroom, that's what you see. You see people experimenting and trying and discussing it and coming up with a variety of solutions. And so somewhere between kindergarten, 1st grade, and when we go back to school as an adult, we are trained the way you said. Get to the best solution, right? My solution. Get there. And then we become adults and we have to relearn it. And we try it in school, and it's very difficult. I can tell you from an academic perspective, it's very, very difficult. So then do we become fixated? Is that your next piece? We become fixated on our process, our solution? Is that our
Yeah, I mean, fixation is my term for what, and you're a psychologist, so you know what functional fixedness is. That's the fancy and more scientific term for it, but it's sort of the inability to go off-road with our thinking. So when we become accustomed to looking at a problem in a certain way and we stop doing what kids do, real kids do, which is, and what good artists do, which is to look at the problem from 360 degrees, right? We look at it upside down, we look at it from backwards to front, and we have tunnel vision, so to speak. So in keeping with the story of the bomb squad, they kept doing the dance moves. You get down on your knees and I'll step through that and I'll turn around and da 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 da. And they kept doing it it's just a 5-minute exercise. Usually, someone figures it out in that time. Interestingly enough, they didn't. And this was my first time, so I had no basis. But now I only do it for 5 minutes or until someone gets the solution. But they fixate on this has to work, right? And I call this I call this affectionately the remote control trap, which is, you come home at the end of the day, or these days you're rarely home, but you sit down, you've done your Zoom meetings, and you decide to watch some TV. So what do? You pick up the remote and you aim it at the TV. It's worked 99 billion times in the past. Why wouldn't it work this time? Only it doesn't. Right? And so what do we immediately do? We keep hitting that
doing
button.
The same thing. Or we hit it. We hit it. Like maybe if I pat it on its back, it will suddenly start to work.
Yeah, we have a whole litany of things that have worked in the past, and it's only when none of that works that we get to the question that always, launches the kind of creative problem-solving process that we need, which is why, right? Why isn't this working, right? We've hit the batteries, we've rolled them around, we've changed them out, we've looked at all the wiring, and the thing still isn't going on. And incidentally, we always go back to the first solution, which is hitting the power button. But we fixate on that, and if you've ever read anything by my friend Dan Pink, if you read the book Drive, he starts off with a functional fixedness or fixation exercise. It comes from the 1940s, the candle wax exercise, right? It's a very famous one.
I've done that one in classes. I've actually done that in graduate classes with students.
Yeah, it begins with a D. I forget the actual, but it's well-known exercise, and people are able to divorce themselves of the constructs of a candle having to be in a certain position, of a box having to be in a certain position, and not able to make the hack necessary to solve the problem.
Right. Yeah.
So that's fixation. It's and it gets in the way. It definitely gets in the way of great problem solving because we want to rely on what has worked in the past. We still have that fear of failure. And that kind of lands us on the third flaw, if you will, which is if leaping to solutions is perhaps the most prevalent, on the other side of that is overthinking.
Overthinking it, right.
We got to dot every I, we got to cross every T. We'll paralyze ourselves with perfection and never get anything out the door. And so the whole notion of testing in a very lean way, the good news is that lean testing, which is part and parcel to what I learned at Toyota, they implement 1 million ideas a year. Most of those are just little tests. Has been adopted, by the startup world. Gosh, you see it in an exercise I love to do. With people, it's called the marshmallow challenge. You're given 20 sticks of spaghetti, yard of string, yard of tape, and you got 15 minutes or 18 minutes to build the highest tower you can with the marshmallow on top. And I do this all the time. And the adults will spend that entire 18 minutes coming up with the grandiose infrastructure. And only at the last will they try and put the marshmallow on top, and it never works. Right. Whereas you look at kindergartners, just new to the school system, so kids basically, 5, 6 years old. In that span of 18 minutes, they will all come up with 5 to 6 little prototypes because they see the big problem as the marshmallow, not the spaghetti stand, right? So inside of 4 minutes, they've got 3 little sticks of spaghetti and a marshmallow on top, and they build from there, which is what we need to do, right? And come up with your minimally viable product and build on it, iterate from there, rapid prototyping.
Right.
So those are the misleading flaws. It's leaping, it's fixating, and it's overthinking.
Right. I want to say that I think that the listeners right now, if you're struggling with, and so many people are struggling with this, what do I do with my child in terms of school? That there is some comfort in this. Children know how to learn. If we present them with interesting problems to solve, they know how to learn. And so will they be behind in something? Well, they might be ahead in something else. And perhaps we're overthinking how to make sure our children have this best experience right now in COVID, right? And definitely we overthink in the classroom all the time. With how do I build this class to make it work, instead of giving people the opportunity to explore something. So I think those are so right on. We still have a bit of time. Can we try some of the mediocre too? The piece where you just sort of feel satisfied. I can never pronounce this word right. And where we downgrade. I think we've got time for that.
Sure. Yeah, the next couple of flaws, if you will, one is called satisficing.
Mm-hmm. Satisficing, okay.
Yeah, not my term. Introduced to the world, 60, 70 years ago by Herbert Simon, who was a Nobel laureate.
Mm-hmm.
He actually is the person who coined the term design thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But satisficing was introduced to us in a book he wrote in 1957, I believe, called Models of Man. And in that he described how we, by nature, make most of our decisions, which is we get to the good enough point, and then just kind of sell the heck out of the idea. Or rationalize it somehow. So we never get to the optimal or ideal or elegant solution. Now, so it's a combination, satisfice is a combination. He just basically mashed it up, satisfy and suffice. Mm-hmm. So good enough is. The problem is if you make that your de facto goal, then you never get to the ideal or the elegant solution. So, but there's a time and a place for satisficing, especially in the business world, right? If you're releasing a new piece of software or a new product, you don't want it to be, you want to test it out, right? So satisficing in terms of new products and new solutions and new strategies, you want to test it out. You don't want to spend a lot of your resources in perfecting something up front if you don't have any feedback. So satisficing, though, if you adopt it as the goal, then you'll never get to the great solution. So just beware of satisficing.
Right.
And it happens naturally. It just is, it's how we do things, right? That's good enough. Just get it there, we'll work on it later. It's kind of like the home improvement rule, where you get to the 85% completion part, and then it remains there forever.
You never quite fine tune it. You never quite paint the corners. You don't quite, you don't get that. And I have to say right now, we need to do a little of it, but then also realize there are opportunities in this time. That any time we are limited in one way, there are opportunities in other ways. So we may have started there, but now how can we move on? And I think for a lot of
and in the context of this pandemic, what you don't want is a satisficial vaccine or treatment.
That's right.
You don't want one that's just good enough. You want one that's not going to cause more harm.
Right.
You don't want one that's going to allow you to get sick again.
Right.
So that's why we have all this testing and regulation that we need to be conscious of. Just because 100 people work for 100 people there, hey, we got to make sure that this thing is safe. So, but that's why they go through clinical trials, right? So, so satisficing there is kind of built in, but you're constantly ratcheting toward the optimal solution. The next kind of close cousin to satisficing is what I call downgrading, which is in order to declare victory, you back off the stated goal. And unfortunately, we're seeing that almost every day.
Absolutely, everywhere.
Yeah, I don't think there's maybe New York could do a good job of it, but we came out with these phases, right? The CDC came out with these guidelines. I don't think, if you read the news, I don't think any state actually followed those goals, those phase requirements. We all kind of jumped the gun a little bit. It seems like it's on a trend, but it wasn't for 14 days. So we downgraded the goal a little bit, right? And you combine it with satisfied. So that's pretty good. It's 7 days. So be careful of downgrading, because what it allows you to do is to, almost in a kind of perverse way, you're kind of surrendering. It's kind of like a preemptive surrender in order to declare victory.
Yes.
And the way that manifests itself in business and in the project teams that I work with is that they'll set this big goal. A popular term right now is OKR, which is objectives and key results, which are quarterly objectives and results that you need to achieve. And halfway through that cycle, they, oh my gosh, our eyes were way bigger than our tummy. And they will officially back off the goal and say, well, we initially said we were going to achieve 95% this. We think we can get 82. And here's our plan to do it. So it's a form of satisficing, if you will.
Right.
And the difficulty is, if you watch American football, there's a goal line. There's not a team in the world that has ever won the Super Bowl by aiming for the 92nd yard line.
That's right.
It just doesn't work. You may not reach it, but you got to shoot for it.
Right.
So that's what downgrading is all about. So those two are kind of closely linked, and be present and know that they're there, and don't let them rear their ugly heads in the wrong time and place in your problem solving.
I have to say that I can see how all of those link together. So for example, at the budget table, we might fixate on the amount of money we have to bring in an academic setting. This is students. How many students, how much tuition, how am I bringing that in? We fixate on that number, we build a budget, and then we realize that we have to downgrade, and then we downgrade as opposed to look at, well, what else went wrong? Why didn't I reach those numbers? Why aren't I attracting students? How do I need to adapt? And so I've seen that dance in many academic institutions, right? And I think we see it in some of our classrooms, unfortunately, in higher ed, where we want students and we want to be helpful to students, but if we downgrade our expectations, we're actually cheating them. If we hold our expectations high, people rise to an occasion, and they do not become trapped by reaching downgraded expectations. So I think all of those really, really fit together in an amazing way. We're a little close on time, but I'd love to have you, if you could, we got about a few minutes, 6 minutes. Just mention, just because I love this book so much, just mention Not Invented Here and Self-Censoring. Just kind of cruise through those, and then I know there's an exercise that Ellen Langer came up with that you just want to mention. So can you just kind of cruise through those last couple?
Sure. Not Invented Here, NIH, again, not my term. The well-documented phenomenon, which is, hey, if I didn't come up with the idea, or we didn't come up with the idea on our team, it's not a good one.
That's right.
We just kind of have this natural aversion to other people's solutions. You go to cross the street, someone's clearly standing there, has already hit that button. What do? You hit it again.
Because I have to do it, right, because it counts if I do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because this isn't really about having brain damage or anything. We just don't trust other people's solutions. And so what happens is we end up reinventing the wheel. And the solution, the fix for that, is to have an open mind and to learn from others that have faced the same problem. You don't necessarily need to really adopt their solution, but use it as an input into your own problem solving. So don't just, in a knee-jerk way, reject an idea just because it came from somewhere else and not you. The final one, self-censoring, is what I believe to be the deadliest of the 7 fatal thinking flaws. If leaping is the most prevalent, self-censoring is the deadliest. And it basically, it's when we squelch or stifle or shut down one of our ideas internally before it ever sees the light of day because of the fear of failure. And we've been taught, right, that failure is a bad thing, and so we censor ourselves. And there's this inner critic, that Carl Jung referred to, that it's kind of voice of judgment that we need to be conscious of. And the way it played out, and to circle back to the bomb squad, the way this played out in that particular exercise was that there was a woman on the team with 11 men, and she came up to me after the exercise during the break and said, I could see the solution. But I did not want to make my partner look bad. I didn't want to be the smart kid on the block, but I saw the solution to the handcuff exercise.
Wow.
And that woke me up to this notion of, gosh, if the answer is in the room and it doesn't see the light of day because of political reasons or what have you, then that's just bad on us. That's just a rotten shame. And it's mindless. And because it's so mindless, I wanted to understand the opposite of mindlessness, which landed me on the doorstep of mindfulness. And so that allowed me to make the acquaintance of Ellen Langer, who Harvard psychologist who wrote the book on mindfulness. And I got to spend some time with her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, and we spent a couple hours together, and she left me with an exercise that I think has some value and utility for those that are facing anxious moments right now with this pandemic, because it is a way to become mindful without having to have a yoga mat or being able to meditate. Not everyone is able to do that. I'm not able to do that. So she gave me this little exercise. It's a 3-step exercise, which is whenever you're faced, so whenever you're faced with some future event that hasn't occurred yet, or some situation that you are dreading, like, gosh, I don't want to get coronavirus.
I don't want to get sick.
So step 1 is to, if you're already feeling that anxiety, realize that you've already kind of made an assumption, right, that you're going to get coronavirus, right? So the first step is to realize that you are assuming something is going to happen, but you can't predict the future. No one can predict the future. All the best models in the world haven't been able to predict this pandemic, right? It just doesn't work. So that's step 1, is to make the realization that you've made a faulty assumption, or incorrect or premature assumption. When you do that, that puts you in the mindset of, well, gosh, this may actually not happen, right? And you can come up with some reasons for why it might not happen. Well, I'm going to wash my hands, I'm going to wear a mask, I'm going to do social distancing. And that's kind of step 2. And then step 3 is, well, gosh, even if this bad thing that I think is going to happen happens, there could be some good that comes out of it, right? And you can come up with some reasons for what that good is. Well, gosh, I'll survive it. I'm in good shape. My lungs are healthy. I will have antibodies, right? So it's just a way of, and now all of that puts you in the moment, right? Now you're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about the future. You're thinking about right now, every day, and you're instantly more mindful. So it's just kind of a really quick exercise to bring your anxiety down, and you will feel that anxiety just wane when you start thinking that way. And the takeaway is this. It's so super simple advice, and it is the key to winning the brain game. When you realize the problem looks different from a different perspective, take that perspective. That's the advice she left me with, and that is the way I ended that book, and that is the thing that I think we all need to keep in mind is whatever problem you have, understand that what appears to be the problem probably isn't. Therefore, what appears to be the solution probably isn't, and what appears to be impossible never is. And that's sort of
back to elegance, right? That let's look at it differently. how do we simplify? Let's bring something simple to it, subtract what we don't need, and that is what I thought would happen isn't, because I've subtracted. And it's so Zen, right? It's such a, every single religious tradition that we find, a spiritual tradition that we find, says, try being in the moment. So,
and there's a reason why, the Kaizen, continuous improvement, has Zen in the word. So, to me, it's all about the difference between chess and checkers. You can learn to play checkers as a 4-year-old. It's single moves, repetitive, doing the same thing, and it's all about addition. But chess, which is played on the same board, same number of pieces, your goal is to, in the minimum number of moves, immobilize a single piece. It's difference between chess and checkers, elegance.
That is lovely. So believe it or not, you have, thank you so much. We have talked for an hour, and I'm so grateful for your time and for you doing most of this. I want to give you a shout out. So if you caught the end of this show on KUHS Denver, I've been talking to the marvelous Matthew May, whose my 2 favorite books are In Pursuit of Elegance and Winning the Brain Game. I suggest you go to YouTube and watch his TED Talks, TEDx Talks, and he actually shows videos of the cufflink game. And you can listen to him talk about all these topics, but honestly, buying the book is a great thing. And they can get in touch with you at going to MatthewMay.com. Is that correct? It's
MatthewEMay.com.
Matthew
Gotta have the E in there, because there's a Matthew May out there that writes about terrorism, and I don't do that.
Yeah, okay, so MatthewEMay.com. And I want to thank you for being on the show, and I want to thank everybody for listening to the Dr. Lisa Show here on KUHS Denver, the stream. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and we will have a slightly different topic, but I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, everyone, for listening in.
Thank you.
Thank you. So. Just a minute. Waiting for the camera to switch. Technology seems to be a little slow today. Okay, there we go. Okay, and we're off. Thank you, thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. I had a great